Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. As usual on Tuesdays we have our open Q&A. The first question that we have, somebody emailed and said that you have used this term Sunni Islam for many times in your lectures. Don't you think this term is divisive? Why don't we just say Islam or Muslims? Why do you use the term Sunni? And this is a very valid question. A lot of people ask this question often, and they are, inshallah, very well intentioned. They want to bring about unity in the ummah, and they feel, why do we have to have all of these divisions? And I sympathize with your sentiment, but whether I use the term or not, these divisions exist in the ummah. And my usage or non-usage will not change the fact that different Muslims have different understandings of Islam. So we are not using the term Sunni as a proper noun, we're using it as an adjective. We have one proper noun. Allah says in the Quran, هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَفِي هَذَا. He is the one that has called you Muslims. Before, from the time of Ibrahim, and now in the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The name that we have as a religion is Islam. We are Muslims. Now, within Islam, we would like there to be one interpretation and correct interpretation. But from the time of the Sahaba, differences occurred. The first splinter movement to break away and have a different understanding of Islam was the group that is now called the Kharijites. But they weren't called Kharijites back then. At that time they were called Haruriya they were called. So they had a different understanding of Islam. And they said, for example, that we will not accept Sunnah, we're only going to accept the Quran. This was one of their main points. So for example, when Allah says in the Quran, وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا, the thief cut off his hand. The Sunnah tells us that the hand, when all the conditions are met, is cut off at the wrist. But the Arabic word yad means anything. So when the Kharijites stole, they would cut off the hand from here. Because the Quran says cut off the limb, al-yad. In Arabic, yad can be anything. So because they didn't take the Sunnah as their source, they had a very different understanding of the Sharia. Because they said, we're not going to accept Hadith. Generally, they rejected Hadith. That was the Kharijites of old. So the point being, this splinter occurred in the time of the late Sahaba. After the assassination of Ali radiallahu anhu, as you are aware, that's the whole issue that happened. As well, in the time of the late Sahaba, other deviations began to reject Qadr. The Qadariya were called, they rejected Qadr. They said, there's no such thing as predestination. We don't believe in Qadr. So they were called the Qadariya, the deniers of Qadr. And another group came along, and they said, actions are not a part of Iman. Nurji'u amrana ila Allah. We will delay our affairs to Allah. So they were called the delayers, the Murji'ah. This is also in the late Sahaba time. And then the difference between the Sunni and the Shia came along. This came along after Karbala, so none of the Sahaba were really involved in that, but Tabi'un time it came along. So they called themselves Shi'atu Ali, the supporters of Ali. And then Ali was dropped, and now they'll call themselves Shia. So the point being that these terms have existed from the time of the Sahaba and Tabi'un. And we have to somehow characterize, whether you like it or not, there are different understandings of Islam. So what do? How do I explain? Well, according to this understanding. You can say, according to those who respect the Sunnah, who accept the Sunnah and respect the Sahaba and affirm Qadr, and you list all of the points of Sunni Islam. Or you can say, according to Sunni Islam. Which of the two? Number one. Number two, the term itself, where do we get it from? It is a term that is found in the Sunnah itself. It's not something that is invented by outsiders. And that is why the first person to use this term that we know for sure as a full term is none other than Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Ibn Abbas. In the verse in the Quran, يَوْمَ تَبْيَضُّ وُجُوهٌ وَتَسْوَدُّ وُجُوهٌ. On that day, certain faces will be bright, certain faces will be cloudy. Ibn Abbas said, the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, their faces will be bright. And the people who rejected the Sunnah and they fell into deviation, he meant the Kharijites, because at that time, the Kharijites were a fanatic group. They were murderers and killers. And again, later on we'll have longer lectures, but I have said this bluntly and I stand by this. If you study Kharijite history, ISIS is a manifestation of Kharijism. This is what Kharijites were, killing Muslims. Everybody is a kafir unless you're with our interpretation. My way, or not just the highway, but the grave. My way, or we will kill you. And they kill more Muslims than, and the same fanaticism that we find in these groups goes back. As our Prophet ﷺ said, there will always be this group, Kharijites, they will always be coming out and forth until Dajjal comes. And in one hadith he said, and they will then fight on the side of Dajjal. Pause here, footnote. We see, a'udhu billah, evil scholars in our time still justifying tyranny and whatnot, on the side of the taghuts of our time. Don't be surprised that you're going to find on the side of Dajjal himself when that happens. We ask Allah's afiyah. The point being that the term Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, where did it come from? Ibn Abbas. Where did Ibn Abbas come? Do you think he pulled it out of his pocket? He turned his kufi turban upside down and pulled it out? Not out of his hat, but out of his turban. Where did he get it from? It is found in the hadith itself. Our Prophet ﷺ said, you will see a lot of ikhtilaf after I die. You will see a lot of ikhtilaf after I die. So, this hadith in Abu Dawud, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. Then I command you to follow my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided khulafa. In another hadith reported in Tirmidhi, our Prophet ﷺ said that my ummah will divide into many groups, 73 he said. They said, Ya Rasulullah, which one should we follow? He said, Al-Jama'ah. Follow the Jama'ah. What does the Jama'ah mean? It has many meanings. Number one, it means, this is the primary meaning of Jama'ah, the bulk of the ummah, follow them. Follow the bulk of the ummah. Al-Jama'ah means the group. Follow the group. Number two, Jama'ah means the Sahaba. They are the main Jama'ah is the Sahaba. Follow the Sahaba. Okay? And there are other interpretations as well. The point being, so in this hadith he said, follow the Jama'ah. In the other hadith he says, follow the Sunnah. So we take this hadith, we take that hadith, and we get the term what? The people of the Sunnah and Jama'ah. We got it straight from the hadith of the Prophet. And subhanallah, from the earliest of Islam, the main splinter groups that formed, they rejected hadith. The Khawarij rejected hadith. The Murji'ah rejected hadith. The Qadariyah rejected hadith. And then those who supported Ali, or we should say, they claimed to support Ali. In my more academic lecture detail that I give online, you'll find it. I say, in reality, we are the true supporters of Ali. We are the real supporters of Ali. That group is saying they are supporters. They are not the real supporters of Ali radiallahu anhu. But the point being, those who claim to be on the side of Ali and the partisans of Ali, they don't follow the Sunnah, do they? Their second source is what the Imams say. For us, what is our source? The Quran and the Sunnah. For them, what is their source? The Quran and the Imams. So we have a fundamental difference, and that difference is what? Sunnah. So the main point of difference between our interpretation of Islam is that for us the Sunnah is a necessary source. You cannot understand the Quran without the Sunnah. So we call ourselves Sunni. Now I understand an innocent Muslim says, oh, we are using this term to be divisive. And you know what? At a certain level I agree with you. But it is possible for a correct Quranic term to be misapplied and used to divide the ummah. So then what do you think about a term that is not in the Quran? It can be misused and applied. The fact that the term can be misused does not negate the validity of the term. For example, in the Quran we have the term Muhajir and Ansar. Correct? It's in the Quran, right? Very explicit in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions wal-muhajina wal-ansar. Allah mentions muhajir and ansar. These are Quranic terms, yes or no? Allah divided the Muslims into muhajir and ansar, yes or no? Okay, what happened? In the return of the Ghazwa of Bani al-Mustaliq, the munafiqun began irritating. And they said, لَإِن رَجَعْنَا إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ لَيُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلِ. And they began causing discord, and they engineered something and whatnot. It's a long story. And the muhajirun and the Ansar, two of their youth started fighting. One of Ansari, one the Muhajir. And one of them beat up the other, which is what happens amongst teenagers and kids. You have to deal with it. And this is testosterone coming out. You have to calm them down. That's the problem of our youth. It's common. So we calmed them down, but they didn't calm down. Each one said, he did this, how dare? And anger inflamed. And the voice went out, Muhajirun come, Ansar come. And they lined up to have a fist fight amongst themselves. The Prophet ﷺ heard the commotion and he came out. His face was angry like a pomegranate. This is the rumman. This was the highest form of anger where they say his face was angry. And he said, while I am still alive, you are doing this? And he rebuked them, a harsh rebuking, and he calmed them down. And he said, leave this division. It is something that goes back to Jahiliyyah. Now, the term Muhajir and Ansar, correct or incorrect? What happened here? Was it used correctly? No. Do we negate Muhajir and Ansar because it was used incorrectly? No. We simply use it correctly. Are there fanatics that use the term to inspire hatred? Wallahi, yes, there are. We correct that hatred. The term is not meant to inspire hatred. The term is not meant to make people uncomfortable or make them feel anything like that. The term is meant as a description. We are describing, when you ask me a question sometimes about advanced theology, I have to say, well, we Sunnis believe this, so that you know that there are other interpretations. I obviously don't agree with those interpretations, but you know what? It is necessary to be educated. It's necessary to know what is the red line. Very necessary. And I will be very frank amongst you and say, just because somebody disagrees doesn't make them a kafir. This is a very important point. Because the rest of the groups, we said it many weeks ago, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, I forgot now, we talked about the 73 groups. I said these groups are all Muslim groups. We're not talking about the groups outside of Islam. Those that the Prophet ﷺ said are incorrect, misguided, he called them my ummah. My ummah will divide into 73. These aren't the kafirs. There are groups that are outside the fold of Islam. They're not within Islam. And I gave an example. Any group that says there's a messenger after the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they're not within Islam. They're not from the 73. So the 73 are within Islam. So it is important we educate ourselves, not so that we agree, but so that we know our faith, number one. Number two, if the opportunity arises, we call them to the truth. And number three, so that we at least create a civil society. You will hear from me very often, listen, we need to learn to disagree without being angry or violent. What good does it do? Wallahi, my dear Muslim brothers and sisters, look back home, the violence that takes place between the sects of Islam. Look back home, the anger, the fanaticism. This is not from the Sunnah. It is not from the Sahaba themselves. And I'll give you the best example for this. The Khawarij, the ones who became so fanatical, the ones who became so crazed and they started killing people and whatnot. Before they were only talking, they weren't acting that fanatical. Ali radiallahu anh sent Ibn Abbas to debate with them. And they had a big debate. A third of them came back to the truth and 2/3 remained as they were. Or it is said 1/3 remained, 2/3. Both riwayat are found there. Basically a large amount remained. Over 2,000-3,000 people remained Kharijites. They refused to change their aqidah. Now, this isn't an Islamic state. This is Khulafa al-Rashidun. This isn't just a Khalifa of the Umayyads or Abbasids or Mamluks or Mughals. This is Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh. 4,000 Muslims say, we don't agree with your theology. We're not going to be Sunni. Ali radiallahu anhu said, there's nothing we can do. I cannot force you to believe like I believe. I can't open your heart and force you to be Sunni. I cannot force you. You go, you live your lives, you do as you want. He gave them freedom of interpretation in an ideal Islamic state. What do you think in the modern countries we cannot give them freedom of interpretation? Wallahi, think about it. In an ideal Islamic state, under the Khulafa al-Rashidun, Ali radiallahu anhu said to them, you are free to do as you please. We can't do anything other than talk to you, but don't harm the believers. Don't harm the believers. The Khawarij, they didn't stop at talking. They began to attack, hijack, and then what was the last straw? They massacred brutally Muhammad ibn Ammar ibn Yasir, Ammar ibn Yasir's son. And they took his wife who was pregnant, A'udhu Billah, slit her throat open, not throat, the belly, took them, it was just gruesome. Fanatics, as you see these people burning in cages and massacring journalists. It's exact same mentality, thinking that they're defending Islam. This is their fanaticism, same thing. So Ali radiallahu anhu couldn't let that go. You're disturbing civil order. So he fought them. But before that, what did he say? We have no right over you as long as you don't harm us. Subhanallah, if this is in an ideal Islamic land. I mean, can you go and force people to accept your interpretation? As long as they're not violent, as long as you have the right to debate, you have the right to argue, you have the right to preach the truth. But if a group of people insist, we're not going to accept your theology, what are you going to do? So the term Sunni is not meant to divide. It is meant merely to educate and to preach. Some people misuse it, agreed. Some people incite violence, hatred, agreed. We need to talk to them. And we need to make sure they don't do that. It doesn't negate the validity of the term. Today we have 2 long questions. So one more question, then we're done, inshallah ta'ala. The second question, we try to do miscellaneous. So today, second question will be fiqhi. Maybe next week we'll do methodology and whatnot. Next week we'll try. So this is a fiqhi question, and I got at least 10 questions of this nature in the last 5 weeks. So this needs to be done. And that is the issue of lowering the pants beneath the ankles. No exaggeration, at least 10 people have emailed me. They want to know what is the Islamic ruling about lowering the pants beneath the ankles. And this is a topic that needs to be discussed. There's no problem. So inshallah, I thought I would do it today. So, let us go back to the hadith. Our Prophet ﷺ said, "Man jarra thawbahu khuyala lam yanzur Allahu ilayhi yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever lowers his thawb out of pride, Allah will not look at him on Judgment Day. Whoever lowers his thawb beneath the ankle, this is isbal in Arabic it's called, Allah will not look at him on Judgment Day. And our Prophet ﷺ also said that Allah Azza wa Jal, that whatever is beneath the ankles is in the fire. ما أسفل من الكعبين ففي النار. Whatever is beneath the ankles is in the fire. Now these ahadith and more are found in pretty much all of the books of hadith. Bukhari, Muslim, you mentioned it, it's found in there. So there is no difference of opinion amongst the ummah, no ikhtilaf, that whoever lowers the garments out of pride, man jarra thawbahu khuyala. There is an adjective, khuyala, makhila, which is out of boastfulness and arrogance. There is unanimous consensus amongst all the scholars of Islam. Whoever lowers that garment out of pride, it is a major sin. Imam al-Dhahabi, in his famous book, The Major Sin, he lists one of those numbers, 37 or something, to lower the garment out of pride. Pause here, footnote. What is pride and garments, and what is zakatu showing off? It's very simple. My dear brothers and sisters, go back 1,440 years. Go back 1,440 years. Cloth was scarce. The environment, dirty and dusty. Across the globe, by and large, across the globe, not just in Arabia. In Rome, what did they wear? They wore a garment. Where did it go down to? In China, what did they wear? They wore a long robe. Where did it go down to? Generally speaking, at that time and place, out of common sense, out of utility, the garments would go beneath the knees to lower than the knees to above the ankle. Why? Because the road's dirty. It's going to get filthy. Cloth is scarce. You don't want to get it dirty. Why would you get it dirty? You're going to step in puddles, etc., etc. Now, in every society, people invent ways to show off their wealth. In our times, flashy cars is an example. Okay, you get that. What is the name of the flashy car? I was going to say Bugatti, but he's going down there. Okay. Not that anybody who gets a Bugatti is haram or whatnot, Ferrari, but I'm saying suppose somebody got a Lamborghini driving through a parking lot. What is his goal? What's he want to do? Show off. I mean, this is arrogance. Now, how did they have the Ferraris and the Bugattis? What did they do? Believe it or not, one of the things they did was, I have so much wealth, I can flaunt it. I can show you how rich I am. I can wear my garment, I have plenty at home. My garment is going to go beneath and is going to trail on the floor behind me. And they would do that. It's going to trail behind me because I can go home and wear something else. Most of the Sahaba had one pair of clothes, at max 2 or 3. Our Prophet had 2 main pairs of those. One he wore for special occasion, whatnot. May Allah forgive us for having 30, 40, 50. May Allah forgive us. But the point is that simplicity. Now, how did you show off? How did you show people, I am filthy rich? You told them, I have this garment and they could go underneath. So, having a thobe or an izar, a lower garment, that went to the floor, that went below the ankle, it is an essential characteristic to show your wealth. There is no utility, no function, nobody does it. You are standing out of place and you're making the point, I am filthy rich. What are you going to do about it? So the Sharia came with simplicity, with modesty, get rid of this feeling. And so there's unanimous consensus. Whoever does it out of arrogance. Now, within a century, the money began to pour into the ummah. Within a century. The Sahaba, later Sahaba, lived much more comfortable lives. That's why Aisha radiallahu anha, she died 57 Hijrah, she would cry when food was presented in front of her. She would say, we never saw this food at the time of the Prophet. This is only 4 decades later. And she's now seeing a level of luxury that they didn't see before. Okay? Some of the later Tabi'un and whatnot, Abu Hanifa and whatnot, they're now living the life. In Iraq, the Persian Empire has given them a lifestyle and the clothing and the garment. Money is no longer scarce. So what happened? The notion of having the pants below the ankle became antiquated. And people now had plenty to wear. And so people began to wear below the ankles. So from the earliest of time, many of the scholars said, these ahadith apply when a society has it such that lowering the garments is a sign of arrogance. To be technical, so one hadith mentions the term out of pride. Another hadith doesn't mention the term out of pride. It simply said, whoever lowers the garment, that portion will be in Jahannam. Do we take the out of pride in one hadith and we understand the other hadith in light of it? The Arabic term is يُحْمَلُ الْمُطْلَقَ عَلَى الْمُقَيَّد. That which is conditional, do you understand it? That which is unconditional, you understand it in light of the conditional. You have a hadith that is unconditional, whoever lowers the garment. You have a hadith that is conditional, whoever lowers the garment out of pride. Do we understand the unconditional in light of the conditional? The vast majority of fuqaha and scholars of usul said, yes, of course. When a condition comes, another hadith doesn't mention the condition, then obviously that condition should be cut and pasted to the same prohibition. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, there is not unanimous consensus, but overwhelmingly throughout Islamic history, our scholars have said this prohibition does not apply to the one who does it out of culture, out of habit, out of if his society is doing it and there's no pride there. And they mention another hadith also found in Bukhari, which is even more explicit. And that is when the Abu Bakr heard this. He said, Ya Rasulullah, sometimes I tie my garment, but without my knowing it loosens. The Prophet didn't say, it's okay if it loosens. He said, listen to this, you are not of those who do it out of pride. Now, if he had said, okay, it's no problem, you did it accidentally, that would have been a different interpretation. But he didn't. He said what? You are not of those who do it out of pride. So, in a society like ours, where the concept of having a pant above the ankles and pride has nothing to do with one another, and in fact, this is now the global culture, then these ahadith, therefore, do not apply in these cultures. Now, if there was a culture where it applies, these ahadith apply. And that is why there are so many narrations from the time of the Sahaba and the Salaf and the righteous ancestors that demonstrate this. For example, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he had shins, the shins that, you know what the shins are, shins that are very thin and curved. And kids would make fun of him. In fact, this is a hadith in Sahih Bukhari about Ibn Mas'ud, that one day he climbed a tree to get some fruit, and the other Sahaba, some of them, they laughed at the shins of Ibn Mas'ud. They were very thin and curvy. It's a deformation. The Prophet said, you are laughing at the shins of Ibn Mas'ud. Wallahi, they are heavier in the scales of Allah than the mountain of Uhud. This hadith is in Bukhari. So the shins of Ibn Mas'ud were little bit, you can say as a child he had, whatever you want to call it, curvature, whatnot, a bit embarrassing. So once in Kufa, now money has come in, now situation is different. His students saw Ibn Mas'ud with a garment all the way to the ankle. They said to him, aren't you the one who narrated to us that the garment shouldn't be below the ankle? So Ibn Mas'ud said, I am a man who has this deformity. I'm a man that has these, he used the Arabic term, crookedness in the shin, it's a specific term. I'm a man that has thin shins. Now, tell me, if somebody laughs at you, is that a reason that you can drink sharab, yes or no? If somebody is going to make fun of you if you don't drink sharab, can you drink sharab? No, because sharab is what? Haram. If lowering the garments had been haram, or as our teenagers say, haram, haram, is it haram, haram, they ask me? New term they invented. If lowering the ankle, the garment had been haram, would Ibn Mas'ud say, oh, people laugh at my shins, that's why? Yes or no? Do you see what I'm saying here? That's not the case, right? So he allowed it. As well, Abu Hanifa, Imam al-A'zam, the Imam of fiqh, Abu Hanifa, al-Shafi'i said, all of mankind is dependent on Abu Hanifa in fiqh. This is Imam al-Shafi'i said this. الناس عيال في الفقه على أبي حنيفة. Abu Hanifa, mashallah, Allah blessed Abu Hanifa with wealth. You know, many of our scholars were not that wealthy, but some of them. Abu Hanifa, Bukhari, Imam al-Nisa'i, mashallah, was like a millionaire, Imam al-Nisa'i. So Allah bless some people, mashallah, with wealth, but the majority of our scholars were not wealthy. Imam Abu Hanifa was upper middle class. He would wear fine Persian garments. He was Persian, living in Iraq and whatnot. He would wear that, and his garments typically would go beneath the ankle. One of his students said, isn't this prohibited? And Abu Hanifa said, it is prohibited for the one who does so out of arrogance. This is Abu Hanifa. And he himself had it low. Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani, one of the great tabi'un, he died 136 Hijrah. Early scholar. This is a beautiful quote. And he died 100 years after the Sahaba. 130, 140 Hijrah, very early on. Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani had a garment made, and he told his tailor, make the sleeves up until my wrists and make the garment length up until my ankles. One of his students said, aren't we forbidden from this? Listen to what he answered. Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani said, once upon a time, it was considered showing off to lower the garments below the ankles. But in our time, it is showing off to raise the garments above the ankles. Meaning, I'm sending the message, I am more pious than you. I'm sending the message that, now this is his opinion, don't quote me on this, I'm just quoting you what he said, right? I'm not, astaghfirullah, impugning anybody who thinks they're following the sunnah by doing that. I believe you're sincere. But Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani is talking about 100 years after the death of the Prophet, and he's saying what? Once upon a time, lowering the ankles was a sign of showing off. In my generation, to raise it higher and higher, when everybody has it low, that is the one that is being different from the crowd. So he had the exact opposite mentality. The point being, in a nutshell, the four madhahib, the Hanafi madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, the Hanbali madhab, and the Maliki madhab. And I have the quotes here, Al-Nawawi, Al-Ramli, Ibn Zayd al-Qarawani, Al-Baji, Ibn Qudama, Ibn Muflih, even Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, for those who look up to him, that strand of Islam. Even Ibn Taymiyyah has this position, very explicit. It is not haram to lower the pants below the ankle for the one who is not doing it out of pride. And frankly, in this country and society, you cannot do it out of pride. You understand? You're not showing off when you buy your Levi's jeans and it goes below the ankle. You're not showing off when you go to Target, and you get your clothes and they go, you're not showing off. There is no showing off when your normal pants go below the ankle and everybody has it, right? So to tell the Muslims, now, is there another opinion? Of course, there's always two opinions. There is a group of scholars who say this is always haram. And these scholars, frankly, are in the minority in the grand scale of things. I have done research in this particular issue for many years because I face a group of people that are adamant, the hadith says this, the hadith says this. And the response is very clear. That is your interpretation of the hadith. The hadith is clear. The same scholars, Imam Abu Hanifa saw the same hadith as you, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, they all saw the same hadith. You're not the only one looking at the hadith. The hadith is not speaking, it's your interpretation of the hadith. The hadith does not say anything, it's simply giving you these two things. What you derive from it, this is now your mind. I would rather stick with 99.9% of the ummah. And I'm not exaggerating, 99.9% of the ummah. Literally, go through who's who. Now, are there scholars on the other side? Wallahi, there are. I cannot deny that. There are great ulama, I love them, I respect them. Many of them are my own teachers from Saudi, that strand in particular, that modern strand. They are adamant that this is haram and it is a major sin. I love them, I respect them. Look at history and look at what the great scholars have said and contrast with this group of modern scholars. It's a modern opinion, to be honest. It's a modern opinion that has now become mainstream in that small segment. It is not classical. And if you follow it, Jazakallah khair. But give respect to the majority. Don't consider the majority to be deviant and evil and going to Jahannam. You follow your opinion, I have no problem. Wallah, I have no problem. I'm not going to at all, a'udhu billah. You will be rewarded for your sincerity. I have no doubt about that. But if you study fiqh and you study what the ulama say, you will find this is not the interpretation of the vast majority of scholars, because the hadith itself mentions khuyala, arrogance and pride. To say, as the other group says, arrogance and pride is one sin, and doing it without arrogance and pride is another sin. That is the opinion that in Islamic history, maybe 2-3 people have held it pre-modernity. And in modern times, it has become revived and it has become mainstream in one group of ulama who think they're following the Salaf, but the Salaf themselves, I quoted you so many of them, and that's not the case that they have. So bottom line, this is khulasatul qawl, the 4 madhahib, all of them, this is the standard position, that it is not a sin in the eyes of Allah if you do it not out of arrogance, and it is impossible in North America to do that out of arrogance. You agree with that point at least? That there's no such thing as lowering the garments out of arrogance per se. That's not going to happen in your heart. That culture is gone. To require people in corporate America to take their suits and have them above. Wallahi, if the Sharia were that way, we would do it. Wallahi, the Sharia says don't drink, we will not drink, no matter what pressure is there. But when 99.9% of the ummah is saying something, then why do you have to make the religion so difficult and say your 0.01% is the absolute correct? If you really wish to follow it, Jazakallah khair, no problem, you're not going to find me, that's your business. But have some respect for the majority of the ummah that follows the majority position. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, we will conclude and continue next Tuesday. Tomorrow we have the halaqah, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. It's very, very interesting, inshallah. So we'll see you tomorrow for Maghrib and Isha, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.